I'm Naomi, 32 years old, standing in my corner office overlooking Manhattan. 17 years ago, my mother threw me into a storm with nothing but a backpack, believing her boyfriend's lies over her own daughter. Those two words she screamed still echo. Get out! She never imagined those words would forge me into someone unrecognizable. Before I take you back to that terrible night, where are you watching from? If you've ever been betrayed by someone who should have protected you, please hit like and subscribe. Share your story below. Life before the storm was ordinary in the way that makes you miss it later. I was 15, living in suburban Detroit with my mother, Catherine, and my 12-year-old sister, Emma. Our two-story house still displayed photos of happier times when Dad was alive. 5 years had passed since the car accident that took him, leaving us with insurance money my mother struggled to manage. Catherine tried her best those early years after Dad died. Double shifts at the hospital, helping with homework between exhaustion, keeping us fed and safe. She was drowning in grief, though, and drowning people grab onto anything that floats. That's how Marcus entered our lives exactly 6 months before my world collapsed. I remember that first dinner when she brought him home. Tall, distinguished with salt and pepper hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He worked in medical equipment sales, had met Mom during her rounds at the hospital. He complimented her cooking with just the right amount of enthusiasm, praised our report cards like they were Nobel Prize nominations. Emma and I exchanged glances across the table, both feeling something we couldn't name. 3 months later, he'd moved in, said it made financial sense, would help with the bills, take pressure off Catherine. Mom's face lit up in ways it hadn't since before Dad's death. I wanted to be happy for her. God, I wanted that so badly. But something felt wrong from the very first box he carried through our door. Marcus claimed Dad's old office first. He boxed up my father's things without asking anyone, replaced family photos with his own diplomas and sales awards. Mom said nothing. Then came the new house rules that hadn't existed before. Curfews for Emma and me, restrictions on when we could use the living room, times we had to be in our bedrooms, small changes that Catherine defended as bringing structure to our lives. I threw myself into everything outside those increasingly oppressive walls. Straight A's became my escape route, each perfect grade another step toward college and freedom. The varsity track team meant practice until dark hours away from Marcus's scrutinizing presence. My part-time job at Romano's Bakery downtown gave me more than just college savings. It provided purpose, independence, and Mrs. Romano's knowing looks when I volunteered for extra shifts. Emma started spending more time in my room during those months. She'd curl up on my bed while I did homework, not talking much, just needing to be near someone safe. Marcus made her uncomfortable, she finally admitted one night. The way he looked through her things, asked too many questions about her friends, stood too close when Catherine wasn't around. I promised to protect her. Big sisters make those promises. I just didn't know how impossible keeping it would become. 2 weeks before the storm, Catherine's grandmother's ring disappeared from her jewelry box. A family heirloom worth several $1,000s passed down through 3 generations of women. Mom tore the house apart searching for it, growing more frantic with each empty drawer. Marcus helped look, of course, his concern perfectly calibrated to seem supportive without being overwhelming. During the search, he made an observation that seemed innocent at the time. Teenagers can be impulsive when they want something badly enough, he said, glancing at the college brochures spread across my desk. Sometimes they don't think about consequences, especially when they're stressed about their futures. Just planting seeds in Catherine's mind, though I didn't recognize it then. After that, I started noticing things. My bedroom door slightly ajar when I knew I'd closed it completely. Items on my dresser moved just enough to show someone had touched them. Papers in my backpack shuffled into different order. When I mentioned it to Mom, Marcus suggested I was being paranoid. Probably stressed about SATs, he said. Teenage anxiety manifesting as suspicion. Emma pulled me aside one evening while Mom and Marcus were out at dinner. She'd seen him in my room that afternoon while I was at track practice. He'd been going through my closet, pulling boxes from the top shelf, examining everything. When Emma asked what he was doing, he said Catherine had asked him to find something. But Emma knew Mom had been at work all day, wouldn't have asked him anything. We both understood what was happening by then, but who would believe us? Marcus had positioned himself as the responsible adult bringing stability to our broken family. We were just teenagers, traumatized by our father's death, acting out against the new authority figure. At least, that's how he'd frame it. Thursday before everything ended, $300 vanished from Catherine's purse. She'd withdrawn it that morning for Emma's school field trip to Washington, D.C., left the envelope in the kitchen while she changed out of her work clothes. By the time she came back downstairs, the money was gone. Marcus discovered the empty envelope, his face a perfect mask of concern mixed with disappointment. He handled it so delicately, like everything else he orchestrated. Sat Catherine down at the kitchen table, held her hand, spoke in low, sympathetic tones about teenage rebellion. How losing a father could manifest in destructive behaviors years later. How financial stress might drive a young person to make desperate choices. He never accused me directly. He just painted a picture and let her draw her own conclusions. I defended myself immediately, of course. Pointed out I'd been at work until 10 that night, had my manager as witness, had security cameras that could prove my whereabouts. But Marcus wondered aloud if I could have taken it before leaving. The seeds of doubt he'd been planting for months were starting to bloom. Catherine wanted to believe me, I could see it in her eyes. But the doubt was there too, growing stronger with each of Marcus's carefully placed observations. That night I heard them talking through the thin walls between our bedrooms. Marcus suggesting maybe I needed professional help. Catherine crying, saying she didn't know what to do anymore, that she was failing as a mother, him offering to handle it to be the disciplinarian she couldn't bring herself to be. The trap was set so perfectly. I just didn't know how completely he'd orchestrated my removal. Friday afternoon arrived wrapped in unusual quiet. Emma had gone to her friend's birthday party straight from school. I'd stayed late for track practice, running lap after lap until my legs burned and lungs ached. The physical exhaustion felt clean, honest, real in a way nothing at home did anymore. I ran until the coach made me stop concerned about overtraining before our next meet. The moment I opened our front door, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. The silence had weight to it, pressure, like the air before a tornado. My backpack slipped from my shoulder as I saw my bedroom door standing wide open at the top of the stairs, light spilling out into the hallway like evidence of a crime scene. Catherine sat on my bed, Marcus standing beside her like a bailiff in a courtroom. My room had been destroyed with systematic thoroughness. Every drawer emptied onto the floor, closet contents strewn across the carpet, mattress pulled away from the wall box, spring exposed. My private space violated so completely it felt like assault. In my mother's trembling hands was a small plastic bag filled with white pills I'd never seen before in my life. The confrontation began with Catherine's tears rather than words. When she finally spoke, her voice came out broken, age-defeated. "How could you do this to us, Naomi? After everything we've been through, after losing your father, is this why you needed money? Is this what you've become?" The questions came rapid fire, not leaving space for answers, as if she didn't actually want to hear my defense. Marcus stood there with his hand on her shoulder, his face arranged in an expression of grave disappointment mixed with vindication. Like he'd suspected this all along, but had hoped to be proven wrong. The performance was masterful. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed he actually cared. I tried everything. Logic first, pointing out I'd never used drugs, never even smoked cigarettes. Begging next, offering to take a drug test immediately to go to the hospital where Catherine worked to prove my innocence with science. Then desperation, asking why I would hide drugs in my own room when I knew they searched it. Nothing penetrated the wall of certainty Marcus had built around her. That's when he produced his masterpiece of manipulation, a burner phone he claimed to have found hidden in my closet tucked inside an old shoebox. The phone showed text messages about drug deals, conversations with buyers' times and locations that corresponded with my work shifts and track practices. Someone had put serious thought into this fabrication. The messages even used slang. I'd actually say phrases Marcus must have heard and memorized. I stared at that phone, at those pills, at my mother's shattered expression, and suddenly understood everything with crystal clarity. This wasn't about money or drugs or teenage rebellion. This was about Marcus eliminating an obstacle. I was too old to manipulate, too observant to fool, too protective of Emma to allow his complete control. He needed me gone, and he'd found the perfect way to accomplish it. Emma's voice suddenly drifted from the hallway. She'd come home early from the party, stood frozen at the top of the stairs, taking in the scene. Mom, she said, her voice small but determined. Naomi wouldn't do that. You know she wouldn't. She's never even been to a party. She works and studies and takes care of us. Please, you have to believe her. Catherine's response was sharp enough to cut. Go to your room, Emma. This is adult business. Now. The harshness made Emma flinch, but she didn't move, kept looking between Catherine and me with desperate eyes. I shook my head slightly, telling her to go. This battle was already lost. No point in both of us becoming casualties. Marcus filled the silence Emma left behind with reasonable-sounding suggestions delivered in that concerned, helpful tone he'd perfected. Military school might provide the structure I clearly needed, or perhaps a juvenile rehabilitation facility, given the severity of the situation. There were programs for troubled teens places that could help me get clean, learn discipline, become productive. Each option carefully designed to sound supportive while pushing Catherine toward the outcome he wanted. I watched my mother's face transform as he spoke. The doubt crystallized into something harder, colder. Anger at being betrayed by her own daughter. Embarrassment at having missed the signs. Resentment that I'd brought this chaos into the life she was trying to rebuild. By the time she spoke again, her voice had lost all warmth, all recognition of me as her child. You have two choices, Naomi. Admit what you've done and accept help or get out of my house. The ultimatum hung between us like a blade. Confess to crimes I hadn't committed. Accept punishment for Marcus's lies. Submit to being sent away to some facility where he'd have complete control over Catherine and Emma. Or leave. Lose everything. Start over with nothing. I thought about my college savings, about my plans, about the future I'd mapped out so carefully. Then I thought about truth and what remained of my dignity. I won't confess to something I didn't do. Catherine stood up from my bed with mechanical precision, like she was following a script she'd rehearsed. Then you have 10 minutes to pack what you can carry. After that, I don't want to see you again until you're ready to tell the truth and get help. Marcus followed me as I grabbed my school backpack, shoving in clothes with shaking hands. He watched from the doorway, not speaking, not gloating, just observing with those cold eyes, to make sure I didn't take anything he considered valuable. I understood in that moment that he'd won completely. Whatever happened next, he'd successfully removed the only threat to his control. I grabbed my wallet containing my savings from work, a few photos from my dresser, including one of Dad, my phone charger, basic toiletries, the essentials for a life I couldn't begin to imagine. Thunder rumbled outside, the first warning of the storm the weather forecast had been promising all week. The universe's twisted sense of dramatic timing. Emma appeared in her doorway as I headed downstairs, tears streaming down her face, mouth forming words she didn't dare speak aloud. I'm sorry, she mouthed silently. I'm so sorry. I wanted to hug her, to promise everything would be okay, to tell her I'd find a way to protect her even from exile. But Catherine stood at the bottom of the stairs, pointing at the front door, her face a mask of cold determination. The last words my mother said to me were precise, measured, carrying the weight of finality. Get out. Don't come back until you're ready to be honest, and get the help you clearly need. This is for your own good. The door slammed behind me at exactly 9:47 p.m. I know because I checked my phone, some part of my brain cataloging details, while the rest struggled to process what had just happened. Rain had begun to fall, fat drops that promised the severe thunderstorm warning would fulfill its threat. Catherine threw my backpack out after me. It landed in a puddle by the porch steps, immediately soaking through. When I reached for my rain jacket, visible through the living room window, she appeared behind the glass, shaking her head slowly. The deadbolt clicked into place, then the chain, then the porch light turned off, leaving me in darkness. The message couldn't have been clearer. I stood there for a full minute, maybe longer, rain soaking through my track uniform, waiting for something to change, for the door to open, for this to be a terrible mistake or a test, for my mother to remember she loved me. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the neighborhood I'd grown up in. Every house familiar from years of walking to school, every tree climbed as a child, all of it suddenly foreign, forbidden, lost. The walk to Romano's bakery took 40 minutes on a normal day. That night, fighting against wind that turned my umbrella inside out within the first block, it felt endless. My phone buzzed constantly with tornado warnings for Wayne County. Seek shelter immediately, the alerts advised. Take cover in a basement or interior room. The irony would have been funny if I could have felt anything beyond the numbness spreading through me. Mrs. Romano had already closed when I arrived the bakery dark, except for security lights that made shadows in the rain. I huddled under the small awning, calling my Aunt Patricia in California, with shaking fingers. Straight to voicemail. She worked night shifts at a hospital in San Diego, wouldn't check messages until morning. My grandmother lived in a memory care facility, now lost to dementia 2 years ago, unable to recognize anyone, let alone help me. The family tree that had once seemed full of branches now showed itself as barely more than a stick. I tried Ashley next, my best friend since middle school. Her mother answered on the third ring voice, cautious when she recognized my voice. "I'm sorry, honey," she said before I could even explain. "But we can't get involved in family drama. You need to work this out with your mother." The line went dead before I could tell her there was nothing to work out, that I'd been exiled based on lies, that I just needed somewhere safe from the storm. 3 more calls to classmates ended the same way. Parents who didn't want to interfere. Friends who were sorry but couldn't help. The social network I thought I had evaporating as quickly as my mother's trust. By 11 p.m., I was alone in the truest sense, standing in a storm with nowhere to go. The 24-hour laundromat on Maple Street became my refuge. It was nearly midnight when I stumbled through the doors, dripping water across clean linoleum backpack, leaving a trail like evidence of my displacement. The elderly attendant looked up from her magazine, took in my soaked clothes and desperate expression, and understood immediately what she was seeing. Her name was Rosa. I learned as she handed me rough towels from the lost and found bin. "Been working nights here 30 years, she said in accented English, making me instant hot chocolate from a machine in the back room. Seen plenty of kids come through that door with that same look, like the world just ended. Sometimes the worst storms clear the path for sunshine, mija. You just can't see it yet. I spent that first night on orange plastic chairs that stuck to my damp clothes, jumping at every sound, checking my phone obsessively for a message that never came. Catherine didn't call, didn't text, but she did update her Facebook status at 2 in the morning, dealing with difficult teenage years. Appreciate all the support from friends who understand parenting struggles. Sometimes tough love is the only answer. The comments poured in beneath her post like salt in my wounds. Sympathy for her strength, advice about standing firm, stories of their own troubled teens who'd eventually come around. Marcus added his own comment about standing by her through challenges, being there for the family. Everyone rallying around the struggling mother, while her daughter sat in a laundromat using paper towels to dry her socks, trying to figure out how to survive. Dawn came gray and reluctant through the laundromat windows. I dozed fitfully, dreaming I was back in my bed, waking to the reality of fluorescent lights and the endless rhythm of washing machines. My phone battery was dying, but I saw Emma's message sent from her friend's phone at 3 in the morning. "I know you didn't do it. I'm sorry I couldn't stop her. Please be okay." I typed back quickly before the phone died completely. "I'll make something of myself, Em. I promise. And someday when I do, I'll come back for you. Stay strong. Don't let him break you." Rosa was ending her shift when I gathered my things, preparing to face whatever came next. She pressed a $20 bill into my hand despite my protests, along with a business card for a youth shelter downtown. "You got steel in you, girl. I can see it. This isn't your ending, it's your beginning. Just got to survive long enough to see it." Walking out into the weak morning sun, my clothes still damp, stomach empty, entire future uncertain. I made a decision that would define everything that came after. I wouldn't go back even if Catherine called. Wouldn't beg for forgiveness I didn't owe. Wouldn't confess to lies to earn shelter. This exile she'd chosen for me would become my liberation. She wanted me gone. I'd become so gone, she'd never be able to reach me again. The first week taught me lessons about survival no classroom ever could. I maintained perfect attendance at school, showering in the gym before anyone else arrived, doing homework in the library until closing. My grades couldn't slip. They were my only remaining ticket out of this situation. Teachers noticed something was different, but didn't probe when I deflected their concerns with stories about early morning training. Sleeping arrangements rotated between the laundromat when Rosa worked a 24-hour diner, when I could afford coffee to justify my presence, and occasionally the storage room behind Romano's bakery, when Mrs. Romano forgot to lock it. I discovered which restaurants threw out perfectly good food at closing, which churches offered free meals without requiring attendance, at services which libraries had the most comfortable chairs for catching brief naps between studying. Mrs. Romano figured out my situation by day 4. She was too sharp to believe my excuses about early morning training or staying with friends. When she cornered me eating expired pastries in the alley behind the bakery, I expected to lose my job, the last stable thing in my life. Instead, she pulled me inside, sat me down in her office, and offered me a deal that saved everything. The storage room above the bakery could be mine. It had a cot from when her son used to nap during long shifts, access to the employee bathroom, and enough distance from questions. In exchange, I'd work every shift she needed, maintain my grades, and stay out of trouble. No drugs, no drama, no bringing problems to her door. The arrangement would be off the books, no official record that could be traced. That storage room became my sanctuary. 8 feet by 10 feet of concrete walls and metal shelving, but it was safe, dry, and mine. I hung my few clothes on a rope stretched between shelves, did homework by the light of a camping lantern Mrs. Romano provided, and learned to find comfort in the smell of rising bread that filled the space each morning before dawn. Creating legal independence required creativity and moral flexibility I hadn't known I possessed. Emancipated minor paperwork needed parental signatures I'd never get legitimately. But I'd watched Marcus forge documents, had unknowingly learned his techniques just from observation. Catherine's signature flowed from my pen onto forms that would free me from needing her consent for anything. The irony wasn't lost on me that his deception had taught me the skills to escape the situation he'd created. Mr. Peterson, my guidance counselor, suspected something when I filed the paperwork. His eyes lingered on the signatures, noticed the change in my home address to a post office box. But he also saw my grades holding steady, my continued participation in track, the determination that must have shown in every interaction. He filed the papers without questions, though he made sure I knew his door was always open if I needed anything. Work became both my salvation and my education. 4 a.m. shifts at the bakery kneading dough while the world slept, preparing for the morning rush. School from 8 to 3, maintaining the facade of normalcy. Back to the bakery for evening shifts that stretched until closing. Weekend doubles that left my feet aching, but my wallet slowly growing. Every dollar saved was a step toward a future Marcus and Catherine thought they'd stolen from me. I found ways to watch over Emma from a distance. $20 slipped to her friend Megan to pass along, hidden in library books Emma would check out. Typed notes of encouragement left in her locker when no one was watching. Small reminders that she wasn't forgotten, that my promise to come back for her still stood. I couldn't protect her directly anymore, but I could make sure she knew she wasn't alone. 3 months into my exile, Emma's coded messages through Megan painted an increasingly dark picture. Marcus had consolidated his control over Catherine completely. Joint bank accounts now, his name on the car title. Catherine working extra shifts to cover his spending, while he quit his job to pursue entrepreneurial ventures that never seemed to materialize. He talked about sending Emma to boarding school, getting her out of the way too. The college acceptance letters arrived at school in April, each one a bittersweet reminder of the life I should have been planning. MIT Northwestern Case, Western, all offering admission to the girl with perfect grades and test scores. Scholarships covered tuition, but living expenses, books, travel, all the hidden costs of education remained impossible on bakery wages. I sat in my storage room, staring at those letters, allowing myself one night of grief for dreams that seemed increasingly out of reach. Mrs. Romano changed everything with a single introduction. Her nephew Richard visited monthly from Chicago, a tech entrepreneur who always bought 3 dozen pastries for his office. She mentioned casually but deliberately that her best employee was looking for additional work. Perhaps his startup needed an intern who wasn't afraid of long hours and had already proven herself reliable. The interview took place in the bakery kitchen after closing. Richard was younger than expected, maybe 35, with intense eyes that seemed to see through surface presentations to something deeper. His questions came rapid fire. What did I know about coding? Nothing yet. What was my experience with business development? None. Why should he take a chance on a high school student with no relevant skills? Because I'll outwork everyone, I told him, meeting his gaze directly. Because I have more to lose than any college intern you'll find. Because hunger makes people innovative, and I'm starving for opportunity in ways your other candidates will never understand. He gave me a test project expecting failure. Build a basic database system for tracking customer orders, integrate it with existing software, deliver a working prototype in 1 week. No training, no guidance, just a problem to solve and a deadline. I spent 72 straight hours teaching myself SQL and Python from YouTube videos and pirated textbooks, living on coffee and determination, sleeping in 15-minute increments when my eyes wouldn't focus anymore. When I presented the working system, crude but functional, with documentation and user instructions, Richard's expression shifted from skeptical to genuinely impressed. He offered me part-time remote work 20 hours a week at rates that exceeded my bakery earnings. More importantly, he offered mentorship access to his network and a glimpse of what success looked like beyond survival. The transformation began slowly at first, then accelerated beyond anything I could have imagined. Days belonged to the startup, learning everything from coding to customer acquisition, absorbing business knowledge like a sponge. Nights were for online high school completion racing through credits to graduate early. Sleep became a 4-hour luxury between 2 and 6 a.m. But every exhausted moment moved me further from the girl who'd stood in the rain, powerless and abandoned, closer to someone who could keep the promises she'd made. 2 years passed in a blur of 18-hour days and incremental victories. By 17, I'd advanced from intern to lead developer at Richard's company, my fake ID suggesting I was 21 to avoid questions about child labor laws. Nobody questioned the story of a college dropout making good through hard work. In tech, results mattered more than credentials, and my results spoke louder than any degree could have. The GED came first, completed 6 months after leaving Catherine's house, followed by online college courses taken at night while debugging code. Business administration, computer science, accounting, marketing, anything that would fill the gaps in my knowledge. Richard became more than a boss. He was my unwitting mentor, teaching through example how to navigate venture capital meetings, negotiate contracts, think strategically about market opportunities. "You remind me of myself," he said one evening while reviewing quarterly projections I'd prepared. "Hungry. That's rare these days. Most people want success handed to them. You're willing to hunt for it, to kill for it if necessary. That's what builds empires." What he didn't know was that hunger was often literal. Every spare dollar went toward education or savings. Ramen noodles and bakery leftovers sustained me while I built skills that would eventually render both unnecessary. The storage room remained home even as my bank account grew, keeping expenses, minimal questions at bay, and my edge sharp. Comfort was a luxury I couldn't afford yet. Emma's 15th birthday arrived in September. I watched from across the street, hidden behind a parked car, as Catherine attempted a small party in the backyard. The cheerful decorations couldn't hide the tension visible even from that distance. Marcus dominated the gathering, his voice carrying over the fence, directing Catherine like a servant, criticizing everything from the cake to the guests she'd invited. Emma sat quietly at the picnic table, smiling when required, but with eyes that had lost their spark. I'd arranged for an anonymous gift to arrive that day. A laptop for school, supposedly from a contest she didn't remember entering. The note attached said simply, "For your bright future. Never stop believing in better days." She'd know it was from me. We'd talked about that exact model before everything fell apart, how it would help with her advanced placement classes. Through Megan, I learned Marcus had completed his transformation of Catherine's life. They'd married in a small ceremony Emma described as feeling more like a sentencing than a celebration. He'd convinced Catherine to refinance the house, the money supposedly for investments that would secure their future. Instead, it funded his gambling debts and a series of failed schemes that drained their resources, while he blamed the economy, the market, everyone but himself. The startup acquisition came suddenly that November. A major tech company offered $50 million for Richard's company, recognizing the value in our automation software that had quietly revolutionized operations for dozens of businesses. My small equity stake negotiated when I'd moved from hourly to salary was worth $500,000. Not a fortune by Silicon Valley standards, but enough to change everything. Richard wanted me to join the acquiring company, offered to recommend me for a senior position despite my supposed lack of formal education. Instead, I thanked him for everything and walked away with my check ready to build something entirely my own. He seemed puzzled but respected the decision, probably attributing it to the same hunger he'd recognized from the beginning. The business plan had been forming in my mind for months, born from watching small businesses like Romano's struggle with inefficiencies. Manual inventory tracking, paper scheduling, disconnected systems that wasted time and money. I could build solutions that would transform operations for companies too small to afford enterprise software, democratizing technology that only corporations could previously access. I incorporated the company on my 18th birthday, finally legal to sign contracts in my own name without forgery. The irony wasn't lost on me. Catherine had thrown out a child who couldn't legally work full-time. Now I was building an empire as a legal adult who'd aged myself through sheer determination. The first office was barely larger than my storage room, a windowless space in an industrial building, but it was mine. I hired 2 developers, both community college students, with potential but no pedigree. Like me, they had everything to prove and nothing to fall back on. We worked around the clock, fueled by energy drinks and the possibility of building something significant from nothing. The breakthrough came through Mrs. Romano's connections, because of course it did. Her cousin ran a small manufacturing firm struggling with supply chain management. We built them a custom solution in 3 weeks, charged a tenth of what established firms would have asked, and delivered twice the functionality. Word spread through the immigrant business community like wildfire. Soon we had more requests than we could handle, each success building credibility for the next pitch. At 19, everything changed with a single meeting. A Fortune 500 company's innovation lab had discovered our software, impressed by its elegance and efficiency. They wanted to pilot it across their small and medium business supplier network. The contract was worth $2 million. The validation was worth infinitely more. Suddenly, we weren't just another startup. We were a serious player. Venture capital followed success like vultures follow death. Everyone wanted to fund the company I'd built from nothing, to claim they'd discovered the next big thing. I took $10 million in Series A funding, not because I needed it, but because I wanted the connections and credibility it provided. The storage room girl was gone. In her place stood a CEO who could walk into any boardroom and command respect. Building the team became my obsession. I hired exclusively from the margins. Former foster kids who taught themselves to code. Immigrants with degrees that weren't recognized in America. Single mothers who needed flexible schedules. People whose hunger I recognized because it matched my own. We built a culture based on the opposite of everything I'd experienced in Catherine's house. Honesty was rewarded. Mistakes were learning opportunities. Trust was earned through transparency. By 21, the company valuation reached $100 million. Tech journalists wanted to write profiles about the mysterious young founder who'd appeared from nowhere. I declined all interviews, maintained privacy that bordered on paranoia. The last thing I needed was Catherine discovering what her abandoned daughter had become, trying to claim credit, or worse, seeking reconciliation she didn't deserve. Emma graduated high school that spring. I attended the ceremony, sitting in the back row wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, looking nothing like the 15-year-old who'd been thrown out. She'd grown beautiful and poised despite everything, or perhaps because of it. Valedictorian headed to Stanford on a full scholarship that wasn't entirely based on merit. An anonymous benefactor had endowed a scholarship specifically for students from her high school, with her exact qualifications. She'd never have to know the storage room had funded her future. Through my network of information, carefully cultivated through private investigators and strategic connections, I learned Marcus's true nature had finally begun surfacing. Fired from 3 jobs in 2 years for embezzlement, though charges were never filed because the amounts were too small to prosecute. Catherine covered for him each time, depleting her retirement savings, working double shifts to pay debts he accumulated. Love had made her blind, or perhaps she simply couldn't admit she'd destroyed her family for a con man. The present arrived like all moments do, gradually, then suddenly. At 32, I run a $1 billion company from this corner office that overlooks half of Manhattan. The view encompasses everything from Central Park to the financial district, a kingdom built from exile, a testament to what rejection can create when it's alchemized into ambition. Emma found me 3 years ago. She'd always suspected the anonymous help came from me, but needed time to process the guilt she carried for not doing more for being too young and scared to stand up to Catherine. We met at a neutral coffee shop in Midtown, both of us crying before words were even spoken. She apologized for not fighting harder, for letting fear keep her silent. I told her what I'd learned through years of therapy, that children shouldn't have to protect each other from parents, that survival sometimes means saving yourself first. We built our relationship slowly, carefully, like constructing something fragile and precious that could shatter if handled roughly. Weekly dinners became weekend visits, became the family we chose rather than the one we were given. She's a successful lawyer now, specializing in family law, helping children escape situations like ours. She advocates for teenagers whose parents won't believe them, provides legal framework for escaping abuse disguised as discipline. The irony of her career choice isn't lost on either of us. The call from Catherine came 6 months ago. Marcus had finally overplayed his hand, attempting to con the wrong person, someone with resources to investigate his past thoroughly. The investigation revealed everything in devastating detail. The pills he'd planted in my room, purchased with cash, but captured on pharmacy security cameras. The burner phone he'd bought at an electronics store, paid for with a credit card in his name. The money he'd stolen while framing me, deposited into an account he thought was hidden. Even evidence from other women he'd manipulated similarly over the years, a pattern spanning decades of destroyed families. Catherine's world shattered with the truth delivered through legal documents and video evidence. The daughter she'd exiled had been innocent. The man she'd chosen over her own child was a predator who specialized in vulnerable widows with teenage children. The life she'd built on lies collapsed as Marcus went to prison for fraud, leaving her with debts that would take years to repay and devastation that would last forever. She tried reaching me through lawyers first, crafting careful letters about misunderstandings and mother's love. Then through friends, people who'd known us before Dad died, asked them to carry messages of regret. Finally, desperately, through Emma begging her to arrange a meeting, just one chance to explain, to apologize, to make things right. What she really needed, Emma reported with characteristic directness, was money. The house was in foreclosure. The debts were overwhelming. She had nowhere to turn except the daughter she'd thrown away. I agreed to meet her last month at a restaurant downtown, somewhere public with good lighting and clear exits. She looked 20 years older than her actual age, worn down by choices and consequences that had aged her from the inside out. Her hands shook as she reached for water. Her voice cracked when she said my name for the first time in 17 years. The non-apology came wrapped in elaborate excuses and deflections. She'd been under so much stress after your father died. Marcus had manipulated her so skillfully she never stood a chance. She'd been trying to protect me in her own way, tough love that went too far. Never once did she say the words that mattered. I was wrong not to believe you. I chose a stranger over my own daughter. I failed as your mother. The accountability I'd needed was still absent, replaced by a narrative where she was just another victim. When she finally mentioned needing help invoking family bonds, she'd severed herself, asking about family supporting family. I let the silence stretch until it became physically uncomfortable. Then I told her about the first night in the laundromat, describing every detail she'd missed. The weeks of homelessness that followed. The hunger that became so familiar, I stopped noticing it. The storage room that smelled like bread and mold, where I'd built the foundation of everything I'd become. Every moment of fear and determination her betrayal had created. You taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, I told her, watching her face crumble with each word. That I could only count on myself. That family was who showed up, not who shared blood. That rock bottom was just another foundation to build from if you had the right materials. And you gave me those materials when you chose to believe lies over your own daughter's truth. I slid a check across the table. Enough for a small apartment and 6 months of expenses. Not generosity, but closure. The price of never contacting me again. She cried as she took it, finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd lost. Not just a daughter, but the empire that daughter had built from the ashes of abandonment. Not just family, but the future they could have shared if she'd chosen differently that night. Emma and I walked out together, leaving Catherine at the table, with her check and her regrets. The family I'd chosen over the one that chose to believe lies. The sister who'd found her way back versus the mother who'd pushed me away. Some bridges once burned illuminate the path forward with their flames showing you directions you never would have seen if they'd remained intact. The journey from that stormy night to the sunny office seems impossible when I examine it too closely, like a dream that dissolves if you look directly at it. Success came at costs. I'm still calculating therapy sessions twice a week, where we excavate damages I'd buried under achievements. Trust remains my biggest challenge. Intimacy feels dangerous. The workaholic tendencies that saved me also isolate me from the very connections I'm learning to value. Dr. Martinez. My therapist specializes in abandonment trauma. We work through the anger that still surfaces during thunderstorms, the hypervigilance that keeps me checking exits in every room, the need to maintain enormous savings because some part of me remains that teenager with nowhere to go. She reminds me that healing isn't linear, that success doesn't erase trauma. It just provides better resources for addressing it. Emma's wedding last year provided a moment of pure joy untainted by the past. She asked me to be her maid of honor, standing where family should stand holding her bouquet, while she promised forever to someone who'd never betray her trust. Catherine wasn't invited. Some absences are gifts. Watching Emma dance with her husband surrounded by the family she'd chosen and created, I understood that we'd both survived and transcended our origins. The foundation I established 2 years ago carries a name that tells our story without words. Second chances. We provide housing education funding and mentorship for youth rejected by their families, kids thrown out for being gay, teenagers escaping abuse, young adults aged out of foster care, anyone who needs the ladder I had to build myself rung by painful rung. Rosa from the laundromat serves on the board of directors, bringing 30 years of wisdom about which kids will make it and which ones need more support. She cried when I asked her to join, said she'd always known I'd amount to something significant. She still works night shifts sometimes by choice now, rather than necessity. Keeping watch for other kids who stumble in from storms, offering them the same hot chocolate and hope she gave me. Mrs. Romano's bakery has become a chain with Mia's silent partner. She insisted on calling it Romano and Daughters plural despite my protests. "You were the daughter I never had," she said at the grand opening of the 5th location. "Let me claim you now that I couldn't then." Every location includes an apartment above the shop available for employees facing housing insecurity. She understands that sometimes a storage room saves a life. Richard remains a mentor and friend, one of the few who knows my complete story. Before his retirement last year, he shared advice that haunts me positively. Success is the best revenge, but happiness is the best life. Don't let the first prevent you from achieving the second. I'm trying to follow that advice. Dating has been complicated, but Lisa understands my ghosts because she has her own. We take it slowly, building trust in increments, learning that vulnerability doesn't always lead to betrayal. She makes me laugh, reminds me to eat, pulls me away from work when obsession threatens to consume everything else. She held me through the last thunderstorm without trying to fix or minimize, just present in the darkness until it passed. Sunday dinners at Emma's house have become my favorite ritual. Her husband cooks while we drink wine and complain about work like normal sisters do. Their new baby gurgles in my arms, this tiny person who will never question whether family loves her, will never stand in the rain wondering why she wasn't worth believing. Sometimes I watch Emma with her daughter and see the mother Catherine could have been choosing protection over predators, belief over betrayal, her children over anyone else. The storms still affect me. When thunder rolls across the city, my body remembers that first night. The helplessness, the cold rain that seemed to wash away everything I'd been. But I've learned to sit with those feelings rather than run from them, to recognize them as ghosts rather than current threats. Forgiveness remains the most complicated equation I've tried to solve. Not for Catherine's sake, but for my own peace. Carrying anger is exhausting, heavier than the backpack I carried into exile. My therapist says forgiveness doesn't mean reconnection. It means releasing the power their actions have over your present. Some days I manage it. Other days, the anger feels productive fuel for the engine that drives me forward. The money and success brought unexpected revelations. I could buy Catherine's house 10 times over. Could fund Marcus's bail just to prove a point. Could destroy both their lives with a few strategic phone calls. But revenge fantasies are just another form of remaining trapped in that night. True freedom means indifference to their struggles, meaning they occupy no space in my thoughts except when I choose to examine the lessons they taught me. Sometimes young founders ask for advice, wanting to know the secret to building a billion-dollar company from nothing. I tell them it's simple but not recommended. Have someone steal everything from you. Stand in a storm with nowhere to go. Learn that hunger is the most powerful motivator. Discover that rock bottom is solid enough to support skyscrapers. But I always add that no amount of success justifies that kind of beginning, that they should find their motivation elsewhere if possible. The truth is more complex than any inspiration I could offer. Success didn't heal the wounds, just provided better bandages. Money didn't restore trust, just reduced my need to depend on it. Achievement didn't prove Catherine wrong, because she was wrong regardless of what I achieved. A 15-year-old girl deserved protection and belief, not exile and abandonment regardless of her future net worth or company valuations. But here's what I've learned in 17 years of building from ashes. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundations of who we're meant to be. Not because suffering builds character, that's just something people say to justify cruelty, but because surviving teaches you capabilities you'd never discover in safety. The storage room girl became someone unrecognizable, not through magic, but through thousands of small decisions to keep going when stopping would have been easier. That girl, standing in the rain, soaked and shaking, carrying everything she owned in a backpack, she had no idea what she was capable of. She thought she'd lost everything. She didn't know she'd been given the strange gift of discovering exactly how strong she could become when strength was the only option. She didn't know that hunger could be transformed into drive, that rejection could become rocket fuel, that rock bottom was solid enough to push off from, with enough force to reach the stars. Catherine was right about one thing that night, though she didn't know it, and I wouldn't understand for years. Getting out was for my own good, just not in the way she intended. Her rejection became my liberation. Her betrayal became my motivation. Her choice to believe lies over her own daughter became the reason I built a life based on truth and merit, where no one would ever have the power to exile me again. I stand at my window now, watching another storm roll in over the city. Lightning illuminates the skyline. Thunder echoes between buildings like nature's reminder that some forces can't be controlled, only weathered. But I'm not afraid anymore. I'm safe, warm, successful beyond what that 15-year-old could have imagined. The storm can't touch me now. I built these walls myself, brick by brick, from materials I gathered in the rain. To everyone watching who's been told to get out, who's been betrayed by people meant to protect them, who's standing in their own storm right now, I want you to know something crucial. This isn't your ending. It's your beginning. The pain you're feeling is real and valid and devastating. But it's not permanent. Nothing is permanent except your ability to keep moving forward, even when forward is just surviving another night. Build your ladder one rung at a time. Find your Rosa, your Mrs. Romano, your Richard. They're out there waiting to help if you're willing to accept it. Work harder than you think possible. Save every penny. Invest in yourself relentlessly. Transform hunger into fuel and fear into focus. Let rejection become the force that propels you toward something better than acceptance, toward a life you build yourself where no one else holds the keys. But also remember this, and I wish someone had told me that first night. You deserve better than what happened to you. Success won't erase that truth. Building an empire won't make the abandonment acceptable. You're worthy of love and protection regardless of what you achieve. Don't let anyone's betrayal convince you otherwise. You were enough then, you're enough now. You'll be enough tomorrow whether you build a $1 billion company or just build a life where you feel safe. That 15-year-old girl standing in the rain became someone unrecognizable, yes. But sometimes I wish I could go back and tell her she was already enough exactly as she was, that she didn't need to build a $1 billion company to prove her worth. That being believed and protected was her birthright, not something to be earned through success. That the people who should have loved her failed in their job, and that failure was about them, not her. And to those who threw us out, who chose lies over their own children, who created exiles where there should have been embrace, I want you to know something too. We survived without you, thrived despite you, built kingdoms from the ruins you created. Your betrayal became our beginning. Your rejection became our strength. You thought you were breaking us. You were actually breaking us free. Sometimes get out becomes the two most powerful words ever spoken to us. Not because they don't hurt, they do. Not because we deserve them, we didn't. But because they force us to discover that everything we need to survive already exists within us, waiting to be activated by necessity. Sometimes the family that throws us away simply clears space for the family we're meant to find and create. Sometimes that's exactly where real life begins. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below, sharing your own experience. How did you transform rejection into motivation? What was your storage room moment? Who was your Rosa or Mrs. Romano? I read every comment and respond when I can. Please like this video if it touched you, subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and triumph, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their exile might be their beginning. Thank you for listening to my journey from abandoned to unstoppable. Remember, storms pass, but the strength they build in us remains forever. Stay strong, stay determined, and never forget that you were always worthy of love and protection, regardless of who failed to provide it. Until next time, this is Naomi reminding you that sometimes getting out is actually getting free.